Hare Krishna. Welcome to our reading today. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So yesterday we were reading how Krishna had asked the black serpent Kaliya to leave the Yamuna because he was polluting the Yamuna river. He was making it poisonous, not fit for the Vrindavan Vasis and the cowherd boys and the birds and everything else who was coming into contact with the water. So he left the Yamuna, went elsewhere, and now the water became purified. Krishna, who invented himself just to kill all undesirable elements in the world, immediately climbed up into a big kadamba tree on the bank of the Yamuna. The kadamba is a tree bearing round yellow flowers that is generally seen only in the Vrindavan area. After climbing to the top of the tree, he tightened his belt cloth and, flapping his arms just like a wrestler, jumped into the midst of the poisonous lake. The kadamba tree from which Krishna jumped was the only tree there which was not dead. Some commentators say that due to being touched by the lotus feet of Krishna, the tree immediately became alive. In some other Puranas, it is stated that Garuda, the eternal carrier of Vishnu, knew that Krishna would take his action in the future, and so he put some nectar on this tree to preserve it. When Lord Krishna jumped into the water, the river overflooded its banks to a distance of 100 yards, as if something very large had fallen into it. This exhibition of Krishna's strength is not at all uncommon because he is the reservoir of all strength. When Krishna was swimming about just like a great strong elephant, he made a tumultuous sound, which the great black serpent Kaliya could hear. The tumult was intolerable for him, and he could understand that this was an attempt to attack his home. Therefore, he immediately came before Krishna. Kaliya saw that Krishna was indeed worth seeing because his body was so beautiful and delicate. Its color resembled that of a cloud, and his feet resembled a lotus flower. He was decorated with Srivatsa, jewels, and yellow garments. He was smiling with a beautiful face and was playing in the river Yamuna with great strength. But in spite of Krishna's beautiful features, Kaliya felt great anger within his heart. And thus he grabbed Krishna with his mighty coils. Seeing the incredible way in which Krishna was enveloped in the coils of the serpent, the affectionate cowherd boys and other inhabitants of Vrindavan immediately became stunned out of fear. They had dedicated everything to Krishna. Their lives, property, affection, activities, everything was for Krishna. And when they saw him in that condition, they became overwhelmed with fear and fell down on the ground. All the cows, bulls, and small calves became overwhelmed with grief, and they began to look at him with great anxiety. Out of fear, they could only cry in agony and stand erect on the bank, unable to help their beloved Krishna. While this scene was taking place on the bank of the Yamuna, there were ill omens manifest. The earth trembled, meteors fell from the sky, and the left side of the men's body shivered. All these are indications of great immediate danger. Observing the inauspicious signs, the cowherd men, including Maharaj Nanda, became very anxious out of fear. At the same time, they were informed that Krishna had gone to the pasturing ground without his elder brother Balaram. As soon as Nanda and Yashoda and the cowherd men heard this news, they became even more anxious. Out of their great affection for Krishna and being unaware of the extent of his potencies, they became overwhelmed with grief and anxiety because they had nothing dearer than Krishna and because they had dedicated their everything, life, property, affection, mind and activities to Krishna. Because of their great attachment for Krishna, they thought, today Krishna is surely going to be vanquished. All the inhabitants of Vrindavan came out of the village to see Krishna. The assembly consisted of children, old men, women, animals, and all living entities. They knew that Krishna was their only means of sustenance. While this was happening, Balaram, who is the master of all knowledge, stood there simply smiling. He knew how powerful his younger brother was, and there was no cause for anxiety when Krishna was fighting with an ordinary serpent of the material world. He did not therefore personally take any part in their sorrow. On the other hand, all the inhabitants of Vrindavan, being disturbed, began to search out Krishna by following the impression of his footprints on the ground, and thus they moved hastily towards the bank of Yamuna. Finally, by following the footprints marked with the flag, bow and conch shell, the inhabitants of Vrindavan arrived at the river bank and saw that all the cows and boys were weeping to behold Krishna enwrapped in the coils of the black serpent. Then they became still more overwhelmed with grief. While Balram was smiling to see their lamentation, all the inhabitants of Rajbhumi merged into the ocean of grief because they thought that Krishna was finished. Although the residents of Vrindavan did not know much about Krishna, their love for him was beyond comparison. As soon as they saw that Krishna was in the river Yamuna, enveloped by the serpent Kaliya, and that all the boys and cows were lamenting, they simply began to think of Krishna's friendship, his smiling face, his sweet words, and his dealings with them. Thinking of all these things and seeing that their Krishna was now within the clutches of Kaliya, they at once felt that the three worlds had become vacant. Lord Chaitanya also said that he was seeing the three worlds as vacant for want of Krishna. This is the highest stage of Krishna consciousness. Almost all the inhabitants of Vrindavan had the highest ecstatic love for Krishna. When Mother Yashoda arrived, she wanted to enter the river Yamuna, and being checked and she fainted. Her friends, who were equally aggrieved, were shedding tears like torrents of rains or waves of the river. But in order to bring Mother Yashoda to consciousness, they began to speak loudly about the transcendental pastimes of Krishna. Mother Yashoda remained still as if dead, because her consciousness was concentrated on the face of Krishna. Nanda and all the other cowherd men who had dedicated everything, including their lives, to Krishna, were ready to enter the waters of the Yamuna. But Lord Balram checked them, because he was in perfect knowledge that there was no danger. For 2 hours, Krishna remained like an ordinary child gripped in the coils of Kaliya. But when he saw that all the inhabitants of Gokul, including his mother and father, the gopis, the boys, and the cows, were just on the point of death, that they had no shelter for salvation from imminent death, Krishna immediately freed himself. He began to expand his body, and when the serpent tried to hold of him, he felt a great strain. On the account of the strain, his coils slackened, and he had no alternative but to let loose the personality of Godhead Krishna from his grasp. Kaliya then became very angry, and his great hoods expanded. He exhaled poisonous fumes from his nostrils, his eyes blazed like fire, and flames issued from his mouth. The great serpent remained still for some time, looking at Krishna. Licking his lips with bifurcated tongues, the serpent looked at Krishna with double hoods, and his eyesight was full of poison. Krishna immediately pounced upon him, just as Garuda swoops upon a snake. Thus attacked, Kaliya looked for an opportunity to bite him, but Krishna moved around him. As Krishna and Kaliya moved in a circle, the serpent gradually became fatigued, and his strength seemed to diminish considerably. Krishna immediately pressed down the serpent's hoods and jumped upon them. The Lord's lotus feet became tinged with red from the rays of the jewels on the snake's hoods. Then he, who is the original artist of all fine arts, such as dancing, began to dance upon the hoods of the serpent. Although they were moving to and fro, upon seeing this, the denizens of the upper planets showered flowers, beat drums, played different types of flutes, and sang various prayers and songs. In this way, all the denizens of heaven, such as Gandharvas, Siddhas, demigods, became very pleased. When Krishna was dancing on his hoods, Kaliya tried to push him down with some of his other hoods. Kaliya had about 100 hoods, but Krishna took control of them. He began to dash Krishna with his lotus feet. He began to dash Kaliya with his lotus feet, and this was more than the serpent could bear. Gradually, Kaliya was reduced to struggling for his very life. He vomited all kinds of refuse and exhaled fire. While throwing up poisonous material from within, Kaliya became reduced in a sinful situation. Out of great anger, he began to struggle for existence and tried to raise one of his hoods to kill the Lord. The Lord immediately captured that hood and subdued it by kicking it and dancing on it. It actually appeared as if the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, was being worshipped. The poisons emanating from the mouth of the serpent appeared to be like flower offerings. Kaliya then began to vomit blood instead of poison, and he was completely fatigued. His whole body appeared to be broken by the kicks of the Lord. Within his mind, however, he finally began to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he surrendered unto him. He realized that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, the Master of everything. The wives of the serpent, known as the Nagapatnis, saw that their husband had been subdued by the Lord's kicking, and he was almost at the point of death due to bearing the heavy burden of the Lord. Within those abdomen, the whole universe remains. Kaliya's wives prepared to worship the Lord, and in their haste their clothes, hair and ornaments became disarrayed. They also surrendered unto the Supreme Lord and began to pray. They appeared before him, put forward their offspring, and anxiously offered respectful obeisances. Falling down on the bank of the Yamuna, the Nagapatnis knew that Krishna is the shelter of all surrendered souls, and they desired to release their husband from the impending danger by pleasing the Lord with their prayers. The Nagapatnis began to offer their praise as follows. O dear Lord, you are equal to everyone. For you there is no distinction between your sons, friends, or enemies. Therefore the punishment which you have so kindly offered to Kaliya is exactly befitting. O Lord, you have descended especially for the purpose of annihilating all kinds of disturbing elements within the world. And because you are the absolute truth, there is no difference between your mercy and your punishment. We think, therefore, that this apparent punishment of Kaliya is actually some benediction. We consider that your punishment is your great mercy upon us, because when you punish someone, it is to be understood that the reactions of his sinful activities are eradicated. It is already clear that this creature appearing in the body of a serpent must have been overburdened with all kinds of sin. Otherwise, how could he have the body of a serpent? Your dancing on his hoods has reduced all the sinful results of actions caused by his having his body of a serpent. It is therefore very auspicious that you have become angry and have punished him in this way. We are very much astonished to see how you have become so pleased with this serpent, who evidently performed various religious activities in his past life that he pleased everyone. He must have undergone all kinds of penances and austerities, humbly honored others, and executed universal welfare activities for all living creatures. The Nagapatnis confirmed that one cannot come in contact with Krishna without having executed pious activities in devotional service in his previous life. As Lord Chaitanya advised in his Ch16, one has to execute devotional service by humbly chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street, and not expecting honor for himself but offering all kinds of honor to others. The Nagapatnis were astonished that although Kaliya had the body of a serpent, as a result of sinful activities at the same time he was in contact with the Lord, to the extent that the Lord's lotus feet were touching his hoods. Certainly this was not the ordinary result of pious activities. These two contradictory facts astonished them. Thus they continued to pray, "Oh dear Lord, we are simply astonished to see that he is so fortunate as to have the dust of your lotus feet on his head. This is a fortune sought after by great saintly persons. Even the goddess of fortune underwent severe austerities just to have the blessing of the dust of your lotus feet. So how is it that Kaliya is so easily getting this dust on his head? We have heard from authoritative sources that those who are blessed with dust of your lotus feet do not care even for the highest post within this universe, namely the post of Lord Brahma, or the kingship of the heavenly planets, or the sovereignty of this planet. Nor do such persons desire to rule the planets above this earth, such as Siddhalok, nor do they aspire for the mystic powers achieved by the yoga process. Nor do the pure devotees aspire for liberation by becoming one with you, my Lord. Although he is born in a species of life which is fostered by the most abominable modes of material nature, accompanied with the quality of anger, this king of the serpents has achieved something very, very rare. Living entities who are wandering around this universe in different species of life can very easily achieve the greatest benediction only by your mercy. So we will stop our reading at this sentence, and we will continue the reading tomorrow. So we can see that the Nagapathanis, they are exhibiting the knowledge of a very highly self-realized person. They can see how Kaliya Nag has undergone two contradictory things at the same time. One, he has the dust of the lotus feet of Lord upon his heads, several hoods, and the other, that he is about to be killed by the Lord himself. So he must have done something really pious, more than pious, in his last life. Must have gone through a lot of austerities and penances to deserve this kind of treatment by the Lord. So they are praying very nicely to Lord, and they are also very fortunate in this sense that they have the Lord right in front of their eyes. And we will conclude this chapter tomorrow, and I wish you all a very blissed day ahead. Hare Krishna.